So I want to start estate planning, but I don't have any assets. Let's talk about it. Hi, my name's Leah Boston. I'm an estate planning attorney here in the state of Maryland and owner of Law Office of Leah Boston, LLC. I draft wills, trusts, I do long-term life care planning discussions with individuals. Additionally, I talk about LLC and business ownership, and I also like to make these types of videos so I can educate nationally about the importance of estate planning. I was recently posed a scenario / a conversation that I was having with one of my colleagues, and it talked about starting the estate planning process, but the problem is, or the hesitancy behind starting their estate planning was they didn't have any assets. I love these types of conversations because they really give me an opportunity to hone in on different examples of why estate planning is not for someone who owns $1 million worth of assets. I'm happy to talk about this topic today just because a lot of others possibly may be thinking this or are hesitant to start on their estate planning journey just because thought process or myth behind it that you need some sort of high net worth value of a stock portfolio or some sort of value in property in order to get started. So for starters, if you come into my office and you have a minor child, I'm always going to say, first off, thank you for coming in, because I believe that anyone that has a minor child should have an estate planning in place, whether that's setting up a fund for them in the name of a trust or having guardianship paperwork in place to essentially say what happens to the child in the event of some sort of tragedy, especially if both parents simultaneously are unable to take care of the child due to death or incapacity. Someone who comes into my office, they say that they don't have a lot of assets, but they do have an estate. Something as simple as car ownership. Have a car and you have a minor child. Something were to happen to you, you could say something as simple as, I want to set up a trust for my child, and upon my death or incapacity, I would like the car to be sold and the proceeds from the car to be put into the trust to be used for the health, maintenance, education, and support of the child. Something as simple as that. You've created an estate plan, you started a trust for your child, and you can continue to do that with all sorts of pieces of your estate. Just want to note that sometimes estate planning isn't necessarily always about the assets, but sometimes it's just as important to talk about estate planning because we're dealing with minor children and or we're dealing with what happens to you, your thoughts about how you'd like to be cared for or how you'd like your loved ones around you to be cared for. Sometimes it's not necessarily about how much you have in regards to the importance of what happens to your person and the individuals that are most closest to you, which is why I stated earlier, every parent with a minor child needs to have an estate plan in place, because minor children, at least here in the state of Maryland, they can't contract, they can't take large gifts in that sense because they are not of the age to be able to handle those sorts of assets. And for that reason, I always recommend for parents to set up a trust. That way they can choose how and when the money is or the assets are to be divvied out and how the child is to be cared for. And another thing to note for people, particularly with a small estate, but if you travel often, estate planning is another one of those types of mechanisms that you can use to lay out instructions in the event that something happens. I talk about these in my previous videos about certain documents that you should have on file, but if you're one of those individuals that are hesitant about starting your estate planning process because you have limited assets, think about it this way. What happens to your child in the event of some sort of tragedy? What happens to you in the event of some sort of tragedy? If you have to be rushed to the hospital, or if you get stuck overseas, for people that travel often, how does your life continue to move on? Who has access, or who is the person that you trust the most to keep your life going, or you have to step away because of incapacity, temporary incapacity? These are all different things to think about, and so it's like estate planning isn't necessarily about how big your assets are and that being a reason why you should start or not start. It should more likely be about who you are, who are the loved ones around you, what do you want to happen to you, some sort of tragedy, but also setting up something where the courts now don't have to get involved and decide who's going to take care of your child, who's going to take care of your business, who is going to be the ones to speak on your behalf. We're here to debunk the myth that you need $1 million in assets to start your journey. And if you're one of those individuals that thinks I still don't really feel comfortable with it. There are options like putting together a will. You don't necessarily always have to go with the trust planning option. However, I do recommend trust for individuals that have minor children and do have higher net worth of assets. But if you're an individual that has a small estate, for example, and you don't feel like going through the hassle of funding a trust or keeping up with the maintenance of a trust, you still should have an estate plan in place, and something as simple as a will can do that job for you. There are many things in the estate planning realm that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the worth of your estate or how many assets you have, but just kind of like thinking of it as preservation planning and being in control of your life. And especially, I'm going to keep harping on this, if you have minor children, an estate plan is 100% for you. If you have any more questions or comments, please leave one down below and I'm happy to discuss this further. Additionally, if you're in the state of Maryland and you'd like to contact my office, my website is www.leahbostonlaw.com. Set up a consultation and we can start your preservation planning. Have a happy day and a great rest of your week. Bye.